within the hour after I signed off yesterday, the disturbed individual walked into the Midtown office building and murdered 4 people, took his own life. He was looking for the NFL, as far as we can tell. A police officer was murdered at the scene. Blackstone executive, 2 other victims. Don't know much about the victims, but the officer has been feted. I also want you to know, I don't usually talk about the shooters on this program. Don't want to create any incentive for people I don't know, but his was a failed career, apparently, in football. Never got to the NFL, but you never know what's going on in a crazy person's head. Someone with profound mental illness, you don't know what's going on. A week ago, tomorrow, 3 officers, 2 of whom were sitting in their cars in Lorain, Ohio, were ambushed. And Michael Parker was the killer, and he killed Philip Wagner, and he seriously injured Peter Gale. They had an arsenal in his car, and nothing's written about that. That happens in Lorain, Ohio. If you have a shootout by a madman in Midtown Manhattan on Park Avenue in the building with the NFL, you'll see a lot about it. You'll hear a lot about it. In both cases, the Thin Blue Line took a hit. A police officer was killed in both cases. 2 others were injured, one seriously in the Ohio attack. My friend Gallagher, Mike Gallagher, runs a fund for the fallen police officer. Gallagher's website will have all the details about that. Whenever an officer is murdered, Mike gets a check off to them immediately from his foundation. And I'm sure both, whether it's Lorain, Ohio or New York City, doesn't matter to good Americans, ought to grieve the police and other victims, of course. And the only thing I'll say about this is that the killer in Manhattan was clearly cracked, psychologically impaired. I don't know what his mental illness was, mentally ill. I have to think the same thing about the killer in Lorain, Ohio last week, about which you haven't heard much. He was 28 years old. He was living with his parents. He had been cited for driving recklessly and hitting a motorcycle by one of the policemen he shot, but he was cited in 2022. So it's 3 years ago. He lost a civil suit in that case, and he's 28, so he was 25 at the time. He, basically driving food around. I can't remember what it was he was doing. I don't know if it was. I don't want to name a company because I'm not sure who he was driving for, but he got reckless, and one would infer that he nursed a grudge. One would infer from yesterday's killing that the killer nursed an imaginary grudge. And that's what happens in this world. And you can't draw any big items, any big lessons from either of these. I just want to note, grieve for every police officer who's ever been shot and killed, for their families, for the people who are left behind. If you care about that deeply, remember Mike Gallagher. I'm not going to replicate the fund. If I did post the link for the GoFundMe for the Ohio officer in Lorain, Philip Wagner, because it came across my radar because I was reading the Cleveland.com pages, the sports pages, and I saw a note about it. I don't think anyone else has heard about that, right? If you're not from Ohio, if you don't know where Lorain is, if you're not reading Cleveland.com, you probably haven't heard about that. Everyone's heard about the Manhattan shooting. Now, only 1 officer was killed in both places, 3 other victims in Manhattan. There were 2 other victims in Lorain that weren't dead, but they were seriously wounded. There's an imbalance in coverage, but that's natural. Every media outlet in the world is in the city that never sleeps, and they're going to cover that kind of mayhem. And it's remarkable that only 4 people were killed, and that's something else, because a fellow with a mental breakdown on his hands and I don't know, it was some kind of rifle, long gun, in Manhattan, it's pretty hard only to kill 4 people, unless you're just completely blinded by voices in your head. The lying in wait and ambush in Lorain, Ohio, voices in the head again. It reminds me of Gabby Gifford's shooting, where a schizophrenic person just heard voices and went over and shot and killed a federal judge, shot and wounded Gabby Giffords. This happens in the United States. It's not uncommon, sadly, but we have to be aware of it. That's why I always believe in. I got some people get mad at me. I think red flag laws are necessary for people, but I'm not telling you that they will always work. They won't always work. I doubt very much that either of these people would have flunked the background test. I doubt it very much, because no sign of any prior violence on their part. We'll see more as the days and the months go ahead.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.